Next Pats podcast is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry, loaded week one episode for you this week. We're talking Eagles-Patriots. We are talking NFL future bets and try to maybe win the people some money here in week one. We're also getting the legend, Dane Brugler from The Athletic, on with us to talk a little college football, just an absolutely insane week one of college football. But what we want to know, of course, here on Next Pats is, all right, which of these guys, for scanning the college landscape, is going to potentially be able to come in and help this team? It's a long way away. I grant you that. But I know that you need to know who to follow as this college football season progresses in terms of which guys are the best Patriots fits. And we're focusing specifically on two positions, both on the offensive side of the ball with Dane, receiver and tackle. Good news for Patriots fans, it's a great tackle draft this year. Bad news, these guys aren't going to be able to help them out until 2024. So we'll see how things go. Week one, Patriots, Eagles against that vaunted Eagles pass rush. Eagles defense that is now, in some ways, being coached by Matt Patricia, their senior defensive assistant. So a little bit of a grudge match there. Grudge match for Juju Smith-Schuster going against these Eagles that he was clapping back at. There was all sorts of clapping back and forth. Honestly, not really sure how to use that clapping verb when we're talking about Twitter. There's that whole offseason back and forth between Juju Smith-Schuster and James Bradbury and A.J. Brown jumping into the mix. Anyway, it's going to be a really, I think, interesting game X's and O's wise, but there's all these little mini side plots. And then there's the gigantic side plot of having Tom Brady there overseeing all of the proceedings. So going to be a great, great time in terms of the keys for me. And this fits into what we talk about here on the Next Pats podcast. This is going to be a modern day offensive tilt, in my opinion, where you have one pocket passer on one side and a mobile passer on the other, but both running modern day schemes. Talking about a lot of RPOs, in my opinion. You're going to get a lot of zone read, of course, from the Eagles as well. Jalen Hurts, one of the best in the business, both running and now throwing the football as well. He was great from the pocket last year. You're going to get a little interesting nugget later in the podcast about where he might not be as effective and how the Patriots might want to sway him one way or the other when it comes to his decision-making behind the line of scrimmage and maybe even on the move. Is there a scenario in which you actually want to get him on the move? There just might be. So stick around for that a little bit later in the pod. But between the screen game that we'll see, I think the creative stuff that we'll see behind the line of scrimmage and before the snap from the Patriots in terms of motioning and motions at the snap, obviously motions before the snap as well, which is something they've always done. But how can they get that defense to move and to adjust, especially their linebackers? Nakobe Dean, friend of the Next Pats podcast, how do they influence him? He's very inexperienced. He's a little bit undersized. There are going to be ways that they try to exploit him and exploit what the Eagles have going on in the middle of the field defensively. Some safety turnover there as well. So can you get those two tight ends going? Maybe you like some of those matchups against the Eagles safeties. And then on the other side of the ball, you have to make sure, again, that you bother Jalen Hurts while also defending against all these other things they throw at you. The quarterback run game. The running backs are fine, but they are really good behind one of the best offensive lines in the league. And then, oh, by the way, they have two number one receivers in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So what do you do with your safeties? Do you play safeties over the top of both? Do you trust Christian Gonzalez to play one-on-one man coverage against one of the best and most physical, by the way, receivers in the NFL? It does not look like a great matchup for a player who we all believe has talent, but who certainly had questions about his level of physicality he was going to bring to the NFL in Christian Gonzalez. Not exactly who you want to see in your first pro game. A.J. Brown on the other side, 225, rocked up and ready to throw you out the club at the receiver position. So fascinating matchup on so many fronts. We're going to have a great conversation about this game and about much more. We're going to talk a little gambling here. Brought in my buddy Tom Giles, brought in my buddy Rob Snyder, one of our extraordinary producers at NBC Sports Boston. And we're going to talk about our favorite bets. We're talking win totals. Okay, our favorite over, our favorite under. We're going to talk about the Patriots there as well and what the season-long outlook is for them. But then we're also going to get into some nitty-gritty. We're going to talk MVPs. We're going to talk Coach of the Year. And then we're going to talk about this game in particular. Patriots, only 3.5-point dogs. Why? We dig into it, especially with Robbie Buckets. Snyder is a big Eagles fan. He's from Philadelphia, follows the team very, very closely, but he's also, as all good Eagles fans are, critical of his team. And he'll tell you where the weak links are, and he does in this conversation. Let's get to it right now. There they are, my good friends. Rob Snyder, producer extraordinaire, NBC Sports Boston, Tom Giles. Everyone knows him. You love him. We've got some real degenerates on our hands here, friends.
Oh, boy.
Who better to bring on to talk a little gambling than the two of you? We're going to have some fun here. The first thing I want to get into is over-unders. What are your juiciest selections? Because I have a couple that you might think are dumb, but I want to hear your dumb suggestions first. We're going to help the people try to win some money.
We're talking win totals right now. I've got a few that I like here. It's funny, though. When you look at these, it's always you kind of look at teams that you expect to kind of stink and you want to go on the unders. I like Cleveland going under 9.5 wins. I just think that they could be poised for a disaster because that's what Cleveland does, and that division's really good. Like, I think Pittsburgh's going to be pretty good. I think that Cincinnati, obviously, is going to be very difficult. Baltimore, I think Cleveland's probably going to finish fourth in that division. And then another under that I like right out of the gate is Tampa Bay under 6.5 because they've just kind of got disaster written all over them. You know, just trying to figure out their quarterback situation. I could see Tampa Bay, even in that really bad division, winning like 5 games.
Yeah, there's like no path to the Buccaneers winning more than 5 games, right, Rob? Baker Mayfield's going to be their quarterback. He's on like his 8th team in the last 6 months. It's insane.
I agree. I mean, I would pick that also. I would say the only caveat is that the Bucs defense is still probably pretty good. So they might be in games a little bit more than you would like if you bet that under. But I agree with both Giles picks. I think they're solid. I think the biggest slam dunk in all over-under territory, FanDuel still has it 4.5. Cardinals under 4.5. It's unbelievable that it's still there. This team is not winning 5 games. Last year, 4 teams finished with 4 or less wins. Somebody has to lose the games. Why not it be the team that doesn't have a starting quarterback, probably has the worst defense in football, and might also have the worst offense in football? I don't know if Kyler Murray's going to come back, and if he does, I wouldn't be shocked if he's dealt at the deadline. I don't see 3 wins on their schedule. I can't imagine they win 5. There's no way this team's winning 5. There's going to be teams that finish 4-13 or worse. The Cardinals are the easy one there. I think that's a slam dunk. And then I do have an over, which is Seattle, 8.5. I think that's an easy one. I don't really understand why it's 8.5. I actually think they're going to win the division. Don't tell the Niners that. I don't think anything that Geno did last year was like weird. I didn't think they schemed stuff awkwardly for him. I thought he was just good. I think his targets are good. They got better. The weapons around him are solid. I think their defense gets better. And Pete Carroll is in the Mike Tomlin territory. He doesn't really have losing seasons. So I like Seattle easily to win 9 games or more.
I like both of these. Maybe the most relevant reason to take the Cardinals under, and I have a lot of respect for a lot of people in that organization there. But the one thing you didn't mention, Rob, was I don't think they want to win 5 games.
Oh, God, yeah.
That's very true. Yeah.
Why would they? There's also this whole situation with Kyler Murray and his injury and the amount of guarantees that would come his way if he was actually injured again. And so there's financial incentive to keep him on the physically unable to perform list, like for the entire year. Now, how much you're willing to fudge that, like, we don't have to get into that in terms of what the Cardinals choose to do with him, but maybe he is healthy at some point and they just don't want to play him and they are willing to deal him. I don't know what you'd be getting back. It'd be pennies on the dollar. But if you're drafting first or second and you got a chance at Caleb Williams or Drake May, and it looks like there might be 2 or 3 other quarterbacks in this class that are really, really good, you're not going to be trying to win 5, 6, 7 games and drop maybe out of those top 2 slots. So I love the Cardinals pick, and I like the Seahawks pick too. I will say this, and I'm such a coward. I'm such a coward. I, months ago, placed a bet for both the Dolphins and the Seahawks to make the Super Bowl this year.
Oh, wow.
As relative long shots, but both teams that I truly feel have a path to make a real run. And I cashed out. I got a little nervous and I cashed out.
You
Giles is looking at me like, what?
You cashed out a future step before the season started?
But I did it, way early, and I'm just scared of Tua's injury, and I said, you know what? Give me my money back, because I didn't lose anything on it. So I got a little aggressive, I think, a couple months ago when I did that, but I think the thinking still stands. That Seahawks team could be pretty good. They're going to win 4 games just based on facing the Cardinals and the Rams alone, Giles, I think, right?
I guess so. I mean, are the Rams really going to be that bad? I understand that Cooper Kupp's injury right now is certainly, kind of that's a huge hit to them. Obviously, we saw that last year, but are they going to be that bad? Like, that's the thing that I can't figure out in the NFC West.
They just don't have any players like outside of Stafford and Kupp. I feel like they're rolling with like a practice squad. They
have one of the worst rosters in the league outside of Aaron Donald and Stafford and Kupp. They really do. I think they have they might have the youngest roster in the league. And if you look at their roster, it's like looking at the Oakland A's lineup. You're like, I don't even know who these guys are.
Yeah. I'm okay with I'm more than okay with the Seahawks there. Mine are, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong here, I feel like I have to go with the Patriots because I just did my game-by-game projections and I had them going 9-8, and it's still 7.5 there. It's 6.5 some other places, I guess. I haven't seen that on FanDuel, but 7.5 over for the Patriots, and then under, I'm going with everyone's darling. The Detroit Lions are, for some reason, being spoken about as one of the best teams in the NFC. And I know the NFC is not very good, but they're at 9.5 wins. And I don't think they're good enough defensively. I like the things that they've done offensively under Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator there, but they were a mess defensively last year. And to win 10 games in a division that is not very good, but I think better than people might expect. I think you have a couple potential 10-team winners in Green Bay and Minnesota. It's just hard for me to envision. Maybe it's just because it's the Lions and I just can't picture them being legitimately good and actually making the postseason. The way they're talked about, it feels like people watched a team last year that made a run to the conference championship, and that's just not the case with these guys. I don't think they're a 10-win team.
And that's why I also look at it. And if you look at the odds for the NFC North, like the Lions are favored to win the NFC North at plus 145. I like Minnesota with the second best odds in that division. Minnesota's sitting there plus 260. Like, I think that's decent value right there. And I don't see Green Bay being that good where they're really going to contend for it. And I think people are a little too high on Chicago, thinking that, they're going to go over 7.5 and really contend. So I like Minnesota there at plus 260. And I'm because I'm on the same wavelength as you, Phil, as far as Detroit. Like, all right, great. You had a nice year last year, but I don't see them repeating that or exceeding that.
Yeah, they didn't have that nice of a year. It's funny, like Dan Campbell right now I know we're going to get to Coach of the Year. He's the odds-on favorite to win Coach of the Year. Over the last 2 years as head coach of the Lions, he is 1-14 in September and October combined. So, like, I don't know. It's funny. We keep saying the Lions had a nice year. They went 1-6 to start the year. The year before, they went 0-8 to start the year. Is Dan Campbell that great of a coach? Are the Lions that great of a team where it takes them literally half a season to be like, oh, okay, now we got it?
This is why Dan Campbell wanted a live lion on the sidelines. He wanted to get his team going just a little bit earlier and give them a little extra motivation. So I get that on his part. Unfortunately, he's not going to be able to do that.
If they get the live lion, you could just cash out that bet again.
Am I nuts, Giles, with the Patriots over here? I mean, it's not like the odds aren't great. It feels like
well, you're getting plus money if you're going.
You are
over
getting plus money. I mean, it's plus 116 right now on FanDuel, but it feels like Vegas really believes this is going to be a losing team this year.
So here's what's funny. Like, if you go by game down their schedule, the Patriots are favored in 3 of their 17 games. They are favored in 3 of their 17 games. Now, all the lines are pretty small. They're all within a touchdown. So most of them are, around 3. So they're all short lines, but I do find it interesting that they're only favored in 3 games. If I'm betting the Patriots, I just think, and you talked about it, some places it's 6.5, some places it's 7.5, and everything's juiced to that 7 number. And I sort of agree with that. I think that's right. I think that market's right. Like, I think they feel like a 7-win team. If you want to, you could bet the Patriots to win 7 games at plus 600. that means they have to win exactly 7 games. But that, I think, would be the only way I would bet on this team, because the schedule is so challenging. It's the hardest schedule in the NFL. So they could be better than they were a year ago and just, end up at 7-10, and you could still at the end of the day feel okay about what you saw.
All right, let's talk MVPs quickly. Buckets, I've got your guy. I'm going Jalen Hurts.
The odds are really good. Really good odds.
So good. Plus 1,200 for Jalen Hurts as MVP. And the way they use him, I mean, he's going to end up, I don't know, he could be like an 800-yard rusher and a 4,000-yard passer and account for 35 touchdowns. Like, the way he is used and the way they've constructed that offense around him and the people that he has around him to run that offense, I think it's the best supporting cast in the league. Offensive line, weapons, etc. One of the best tight ends in football, who I think is pretty underrated. I love those odds. I don't think you could go wrong ever betting Patrick Mahomes for MVP, and I think he's plus 600 right now. So it's not like, you're hurting yourself there in terms of what your return might be. But I love Jalen Hurts at plus 1,200. That feels like the best bet to me there.
Yeah, everything you said is right. The only reason, I don't know if there's some statistic out there, I haven't looked it up, where like the guy who finishes the runner up for MVP never wins it the next year. I don't know if there's like something like that. But yeah, those odds are great. It's a tough one. I like Justin Herbert. I wish his odds were a little bit better. Plus 900 isn't bad. I like Kellen Moore going in there. I think they're healthy. They were so banged up last year. I think they'll be healthier. I think he's going to throw for over 5,000 yards. I wouldn't be surprised if he leads the league in passing yards and touchdowns. The other thing with Herbert is he's a media darling. Everyone seems to love him. No one really gets down on him, despite the fact that he hasn't won a playoff game yet. Everyone always has him in their top 5, top 3 quarterbacks, wherever. And I think voters are kind of like looking forward to voting for him. Trevor Lawrence might be passing him as the media darling this year, but I think Herbert has a big numbers year. And I think if the Chargers find a way to be like within a game of the Chiefs, or, again, I still think the Chiefs are great because of Mahomes, but like I'm a little down on their weapons this year. Maybe the Chargers find a way to pass them. I don't know. But if they go 12-5, they get past that 11-6 number, I think Herbert can win MVP.
I like where your head's at thinking about the voters here, because this is determined on votes, and maybe you're right. Maybe people are dying to vote for Justin Herbert. It feels to me, Giles, like Herbert is almost more of a new media darling. He's like an analytics darling. And so people who are, for instance, our age, love Justin Herbert and talk about him on Twitter all the time. And it feels like there's this real big push. Justin Herbert's one of the best quarterbacks in football, and you just haven't realized it yet. But generally speaking, we're not the ones voting. It's a little different crowd.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if the Hurts coming in second last year is actually almost like, okay, he's kind of kicked down the door a little bit, or at least it's cracked for him now. And people who voted for him last year, maybe they start to get that push going among the voting contingent to push him over the edge this year.
Yeah, I had Jalen Hurts written down at plus 1,200 as well. He was going to be my guy. Another one that I think is worth consideration, though, would be Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. He's got the contract figured out. I want to say that's right around, is that plus 1,600? I don't have it up in front of me, but when I was looking at it last night, he's kind of down in that next tier below them. I think Lamar Jackson was kind of, on his way early on last season. And obviously then they had no wide receivers whatsoever. And then he stopped playing towards the end of the year, but Baltimore could be good. But I still like Jalen Hurts. And real quick to go back to it, I like the Eagles over 11.5 wins. Like, I think those two together, they make sense. I think the Eagles could win this 12, 13 games in the NFC. I think they'll be the 1 seed in the NFC. And that also, I think, matters when you're looking at the MVP. So Jalen Hurts at plus 1,200. I like that one the most.
Right. You have to be a good team. And that's why I like the Lamar choice as well, because they're going to be in it, you would think, at the very end of the year. New offense. Maybe he's unleashed a little bit more to throw the football a little bit more. He is, because I do have a little Lamar Jackson investment here as well. He's plus 1,500 now. That was submitted a while ago, but he was plus 1,500. I think those are pretty good odds as well. As long as he can stay healthy, he will be in the mix there. Are you guys weird enough to go defensive player of the year? Do you guys go defensive player of the year? When you
I look at coach of the year. I can look at defensive player of the year.
Let's do coach of the year.
I'll go. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I looked up a defensive player of the year that I think is worth mentioning, because everyone seems to be on Micah Parsons for,
yes,
understandably, at plus 450. So he's by far the favorite. How about TJ Watt though having a bounce back year? Like I think the Steelers going to be good. I think they're going to be feisty. It's another team I like over their win total at 8.5. I think they win 9 or more. But this defense is good. He's coming back from injury. He should always be in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. He's an absolute game record. So TJ Watt would be one to keep an eye on at 8-1.
I want to give you my quick random Micah Parsons bet, which is most regular season sacks. Now that might be good enough to win him Defensive Player of the Year, but plus 1,000 for Micah Parsons. He's on a good team. It's a better team than, for instance, the Steelers or what the Browns are dealing with Myles Garrett. Like you talk about sack numbers, you have to have opportunities to get sacks. So you're looking for a good team, in my opinion, that's going to be leading a lot of games where their opponents are going to be throwing late, and you just let those pass rushers pin their ears back and get after the quarterback. So I like Micah Parsons there. Giles, Buckets, if you do not have a Defensive Player of the Year, let's go right to Coach of the Year, because I'm interested in this too, and I have one that I really like.
All right. I'm going to say Sauce Gardner plus 2,000. But Coach of the Year. So I like 2 old heads. I like Mike Tomlin plus 1,800. I like Pete Carroll plus 2,000. There are 2 teams that I think people are expecting to middle, 8-9, 9-8. I think both could potentially win their divisions. Obviously, it would be a little tougher for the Steelers. But I also think it's like, it's like that actor that's been around forever that hasn't won their Oscar. And then, they win the Oscar. I know Tomlin's won before, I believe. But, it feels like those guys have gone a long time being recognized as great coaches in the league, but not recognized by voters as best, coaches in the league. So I think Tomlin and Carroll are 2 guys that have potential to go over the number that people think they'll go. And I think when push comes to shove, I don't think it'll be Dan Campbell. I don't see any of the newer coaches really doing anything like Dayball did last year. So I kind of like Carroll and Tomlin 18 and 2,000. Also, would it be dumb to throw a bet on Andy Reid plus 5,000 as the worst odds to win Coach of the Year when the Chiefs are probably going to be the 1 seed? Like, at what point do we just say, okay, Andy Reid's Coach of the Year? Like, if everybody hits like their win total about, can't we just give it to Andy Reid and place a plus 5,000 bet on him?
Well, the problem is, though, I remember I going back through a few years ago, I was doing the research on this. You have to improve by like 4 or 5 wins. Like that's where they go. That's just how it is. It's
not comeback Coach of the Year.
I know, but it's like most improved award. Like seriously, Nick Sirianni. That's why things line up where I had him 2 years ago, and I was just a year too early on Nick Sirianni, even though I should have got it last year. What about Arthur Smith? Here's the thing. Like everyone's talking up the Falcons. They love the Falcons. Arthur Smith's sitting there at 1,400, Phil.
I love it, Giles. I mean, I love the bet. I don't love the team, but I do think there's a path to them winning a bunch of games. Again, they're in a horrible division. It might be the worst division.
We've spent a lot of time on this agreeing, and I would love to just step in here and disagree. I'm down on the Falcons. Are we sure that Desmond Ridder doesn't stink?
No.
Are we sure? Like the amount of people that are high on the Falcons, a team who their defensive line and offensive line both are pretty bad. They've gone like wide receiver, tight end, running back in the first round. Their last 3 drafts. Like Marcus Mariota was the starting quarterback for the first 15 weeks of the season last year.
That's my guy, be careful.
Before they went to Desmond Ridder. Like, how good could Desmond Ridder be? I'm not sold on the Falcons. I think they might stink. I actually don't. I have nothing against Arthur Smith. I think he might be like a pretty decent coach. I mean, he squeezed wins out of that team last year that shouldn't have been squeezed. But like, I can't get behind Desmond Ridder. If Desmond Ridder walked into my house right now, I don't know. I wouldn't know who he was.
Here's why you don't have to get behind them. They don't want to throw the football. All they want to do is run. They're going to give it to Bijan Robinson. They're going to run it 100,000 times this year between Cordero Patterson and Tyler Algier. Like they've got good running backs and they've got a good offensive line. They're just going to throw it back to 1943. It's going to be the Ice Bowl in the Dome in Atlanta every single week.
That gets you
that's how they're going to win.
That gets you. No, that's not how. That's how they'll lose. That's how they'll lose.
So here's the thing. Here's why I like the Falcons. They have, according to Warren Sharp, and this is based on, I believe, the forecasted win totals of opponents, according to Vegas, the easiest schedule in the NFL. And so if they make that leap from last year to this year that Giles is describing, which I do think is in play, then I like Arthur Smith for this bet. My bet was Matt LaFleur, and I think he gets a lot of credit already. So maybe the story and the arc isn't what the voters are looking for when they vote on this. But I just think the voters will treat any success that Jordan Love has almost as if it's a rookie quarterback. And if they do anything, if they win, as I suggested earlier, they might win 10 games. Like I think the defense has some pretty talented pieces. I don't love the division. I like the division okay. But if they end up a 9 or 10 win team and they make it to the playoffs and Jordan Love looks like a more than competent player, which I think is a real possibility, I could see Matt LaFleur garnering a lot of votes. Is that crazy?
That's not crazy. One other thing that would be interesting too is if Aaron Rodgers and the Jets fall apart and he just becomes a total pain in the ass. And then, as a voter, you have to look at it and say, Matt LaFleur had to put up with Aaron Rodgers all those years. Like, it's not as easy as it looks.
I wonder how much Aaron Rodgers, his success has an impact on other people's award seasons this year. Like, he could get Garrett Wilson Offensive Player of the Year. He could get Robert Saleh Coach of the Year. He could stink and get Matt LaFleur Coach of the Year. There's a lot of different things that Aaron Rodgers does this year that impacts betting across the league.
He's at plus plus 1,600 right now for Coach of the Year. So something to consider there. Get ready for NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use and you can be on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/NBCSB and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Hope is here. GamblingHelplineMA.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support, Massachusetts. Call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 New York. 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, or Virginia. 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342 in Arizona. 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. 1-800-522-4700 or visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit www.mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming or visit www.1800gambler.net in West Virginia.
Let's go to the Patriots-Eagles matchup here because we have a Birds fan in our midst. Buckets, nobody follows the team more closely than you do. Why in the world is this line 3.5? The Eagles are favored by 3.5 right now, and I can't make heads or tails of that. Is that Vegas baking in the unknown of week one for some reason? Because this feels like it should be like a 5-point game.
I think it's a mix of that. The other thing is it opened 4.5, and Giles and I were talking. It dropped to 3.5. But I don't know how much money was actually put on the game. I think that might have been the books looking for action on it, so they moved it to try to get action one way or the other. I saw one moved it to 3.5 and then moved it back to 4. But yeah, I think it's the unknown of opening day. A lot of weird things happen on opening day. A lot of games become closer than they should. It's a road game. And I think there is a lot of unknown in this game. So that I think that the unknown gives the Patriots a much better shot than it would have if this game was week 14 last season.
I'm surprised. I actually think, if the Patriots lose this game by 7 points, we might feel okay coming out of it, considering the offseason that they had. Go back to week 1 last year against Miami. I mean, that was kind of a disaster. And obviously you've got Bill O'Brien running things there. But, one of the biggest plays in that game was Mac Jones with the sack fumble, near his own goal line. I mean, that kind of turned the game out. And that was an offensive line breakdown. So I'm not sure that part of their game makes me feel that comfortable to even touch the Patriots in this spot. In fact, I like the Eagles at -3.5. And I also think that, and Rob's brought this up before we talked about it, Philadelphia is not the Super Bowl hangover team. Like, they were competitive in the Super Bowl. They are a really good team. They're not primed to be one of those Super Bowl hangover teams that stinks.
I agree with that. And I agree with you. I would take the Eagles. in this game as well. I'll have to go back and check my score, but I definitely had them winning by, I think it was at least 6 in that projection that I just posted on NBCSportsBoston.com. Go check it out if you haven't read it already. But Rob, what's the unknown here? I get it. Every week one, there's a lot of unknown, but it feels like what we do know is that the Patriots offensive line has had a really rough summer. We still are sort of wondering who's going to play right tackle. It looks like it'll be Calvin Anderson. Hasn't practiced much, hasn't played right tackle in the league. When he's been out on the field, he's been primarily a left tackle. So there is unknown there, but it's not good for the Patriots. And then for the Eagles, we know what they are offensively. We know what they should be offensively. It feels like there's very little unknown there. Maybe there are some pieces defensively that have shifted since last year, and so maybe that's what you're referring to. But what do you think is one of the X factors, I guess, that could potentially swing this thing to be a closer game and maybe even the Patriots winning it?
So I think the biggest unknown in this game, and the reason that the Patriots have a shot, is that the Eagles have a new defensive coordinator, and he's up against a new offensive coordinator. So I think, defensive coordinator could be, Sean Desai is respected. He's Fangio guy. And I don't see a ton of scheme difference in what the Eagles do compared to last year, but they don't have film to go off of yet. Bill O'Brien, I don't know if I would be watching Deshaun Watson Texans film to figure out what Bill O'Brien's going to run with the Patriots. So I think the Eagles are going to be stuck in a lot of base early in this game and be on their heels a little bit because they're just kind of in base defense waiting to see what the Patriots do. And if the Patriots scheme things up really well, if Bill O'Brien has a nice script for week 1, I think they could score early. And, if you score early at home and you use that momentum, maybe you get a 2-score lead at some point. So the biggest, if you're an Eagles fan watching this game and you're worried about something, it's the changes on defense and how they may not have like a plan. It might be a lot of base again. Like they might be, you're going to see a lot of 5-man front on first down, which is what they ran last year. You're going to see a lot of cover 2 shell, like, the things that they would run in practice against, themselves. They might have to run this in this game, at least in the first half, until they figure out what the Patriots are trying to do on offense.
Yeah, I think there is the potential for Bill O'Brien to have something schemed up where, okay, there's some question marks at linebacker, is my understanding, in Philly, right? Nakobe Dean, friend of the Next Pats podcast, by the way, has sat in those little boxes that you guys are sitting in right now. And I had a great conversation with Nakobe Dean before that draft, but he's undersized. He's been banged up. He really hasn't played. Complete unknown in the middle of the Eagles defense. Safety, again, middle of the Eagles defense. What's that exactly going to look like? And with the Patriots tight ends in the middle of the field, Ramondre Stevenson, maybe in the pass game, can they get the ball out of Mac Jones's hands really quickly so that you're taking that pass rush out of the game and impact whatever it is that Philly doesn't have in the middle of the field? Are there any players we should be, should we be digging into some over-unders like for Ramondre Stevenson week 1 yards or Hunter Henry week 1 catches? Like does Mike Gesicki score a touchdown in week 1? Should we be digging into this stuff right now? Is Buckets talking us into a close competitive looking sort of game here?
I mean, for me, I'm not touching any player props on this one unless I'm betting unders, to be perfectly honest. I just think that, too often it's juiced to the over and lighter value is going to be on the under. There's way too much unknown, though, I think, about the Patriots offense going into this game, Phil. And that's, if anything, maybe you look on the Philadelphia side.
Is there a sort of under the radar strength that we're not paying attention to when it comes to Philly and what they do, like players to fear, Buckets, that we might not already be fearing outside of, Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown? Is there somebody that could swing this game for Philadelphia on either side of the ball that you really like?
Devontae Smith, I would fear 100%.
Has he become a number one, like looking like a number 1 guy? Because he always felt like, even coming out of college, that his ceiling was sort of as a number 2 because he's so thin and he's not necessarily the 4.2 speed guy. But is he looking like a legit star? Because that's sort of how he's been spoken about this offseason.
He is. I mean, he's an unbelievable route runner. He just always gets open. He doesn't drop the ball. He finished with 95 receptions last year, which is a franchise record, and he had 0 in week 1. So he had 95 in the final 16 weeks. He set the record, the franchise record for catches, while AJ Brown set the franchise record for yards. So they really do kind of have 2 1s, if you want to say it that way. But like, if you're going to focus on A.J. Brown and leave Devontae Smith one-on-one, he's going to be open 95% of the time. That's the problem. And he's the guy to be afraid of if they end up focusing on A.J. The biggest thing that the Eagles do is if the Patriots want to create pressure, which they should. I know I've talked to you about this before, but they should want to create pressure and not like mush rush Jalen Hurts. The Eagles defense, their counter to that is to just throw the ball deep. They have no problem releasing a guy on a go route if you're going to send pressure, go one-on-one and just throw the ball deep. And they have no problem throwing in coverage either because those 2 receivers are so good.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how they play that with both Smith and Brown. I don't think you want Christian Gonzalez just running around out there with A.J. Brown one-on-one and man-to-man coverage. Number one, I don't think they're going to want to play a lot of man-to-man coverage anyway because they don't usually do that against mobile quarterbacks. They play a lot of zone. And so with Devin McCourty gone, Giles, it's like, all right, if they're playing zone and they don't have McCourty, they don't have like our true post safety, it's going to mean a lot of like too high sorts of coverages. And so maybe you can help on those receivers. You get a safety on either side of the field, kind of over the top of Smith, over the top of Brown. But then you've got all sorts of bodies out of the box, and you're allowing the Eagles offensive line, which might be the best in football, to run all over you, whether it's with the quarterback or with one of their, 17 running backs that seem to be pretty competent. Like, I don't know what the good defensive game plan is here if you're Bill Belichick.
Well, and if they're going to run the ball a lot, I think one thing to also think about is, are the Patriots really going to try to slow this game down? Because again, like my thoughts for them for the first month of the season is just to survive and advance. You know what I mean? Like 1-3, and if everyone's healthy, that's not the worst thing in the world. They're 2-2, throw a parade like that. I think that would be great for these first 4 games, which means I think they're going to try to run the ball, slow down, and it's gonna be kind of that, not that contained defense, but that try to play that bend don't break defense and just try to shorten the game. So I think that's something to keep in mind as well if you're looking to bet some of the overs, whether it's individual point totals or team point totals or some of these props. I think that if the Patriots had it their way, they're slowing this thing down considerably and trying to really limit the number of snaps.
Just to be clear, when Giles says survive in advance, he means actually literally survive. Just don't die out there. That's basically what you're saying, right?
Yeah. Well, with that pass rush, I think it's something you have to keep in mind. Yeah. Let's try to keep everyone upright.
Rob, can you quickly tell us why mush rush is a bad idea against Jalen Hurts? Because it's what they always do. A lot of times they will call it crush rush, which sounds like a little more imposing, like a little more intimidating, crush rush instead of mush rush. But what they do is they'll basically drive through the middle of their opposing blocker. So it's, Dietrich Wise, for instance, is a good player for this type of attack. Trey Flowers was back in the day. Long arms, bull rush the guy in front of you and just push him back into the pocket to sort of collapse the pocket around these mobile guys so that they can't scramble around and run. But you think that's a bad idea. Why?
Because I think Jalen Hurts is a much better pocket passer than people give him credit for. And last year, he's surprisingly average at best when he's under pressure and rolling out of the pocket. He's not as great of a thrower on the run as people might think because he's a mobile quarterback. And he was probably at his worst throwing the ball outside the pocket. Inside the pocket, if you just kind of mush rush, I think he's gonna cut you up. So I would try to get him out of the pocket. The other thing is he's a very, very good runner. I think he's like, his running season last year was like one of the most efficient last 10 years, running backs included. But he's a much better runner on designed runs than he is a scrambler. I think he's usually looking to throw. I think he always ends up running to his right, and he ends up getting too close to the sideline to really gain a lot of yards. I would try to get him moving. I know that sounds blasphemous with a mobile quarterback, but I would try to get him out of the pocket because in the pocket he can really get to you. And the other thing is with teams that try to do the running into their, how you describe their pass rush. Jordan Mailata is 6'8", 346. Lane Johnson hasn't allowed a sack in 3 seasons. Landon Dickerson's like 6'6", 340. They're really hard to push back. It's not like the best group of offensive linemen to say we're just going to get in there and push him back. It doesn't. I would try to speed rush I would put Judon across from Mailata as much as possible and try to speed rush him as much as possible. I'd send extra pressure. They were okay against the blitz last year. They weren't great. So if you're going to have any success stopping them, I would blitz, and I would also watch the film of the Eagles-Colts game last year in Indianapolis. That was probably the best defense I saw against the Eagles all year.
Oh, and the Patriots will do that. Yeah, they will steal from whoever they can steal from. It is a copycat league, and they copy as much as anybody else. That game plan in the Super Bowl against the Rams was actually a Vic Fangio game plan, essentially, that Matt Patricia sort of copied, and then the Patriots were able to use that in the Super Bowl there. So, guys, I think we've covered this pretty thoroughly. I think we're good. Unless you guys have something spicy that you need to tell the listeners that they should be looking to spend their money on this weekend, I think we're good here.
I think the only thing I'll say about, I feel we're very confident in the Eagles -3.5, even -4. It feels like going into this week. It reminds me a little bit of the Brady return game with Tampa Bay a couple of years ago, where it just felt like the Buccaneers should crush the Patriots in that game, and you saw New England cover in that one and even have a chance to win it. Just that neutral field, and once again, Tom Brady will be in the house, so maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe there's a path for them to cover that 3.5.
Oh boy, this will be a very odd feeling game yet again. If Patriots offense doesn't play well, Mac Jones throws an interception, and suddenly you get the chance, and the camera's up on the box.
But the chance for who?
There. The guy who's in the owner's box.
Okay.
I think you're going to hear that. I think
just making sure we're not hearing a chance for a backup quarterback.
The Zappy chance have to be dead, right? He's not even on the roster
I would think so.
anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think he'll be in uniform. That's my guess right now. I don't know how they're going to handle the backup quarterback thing. But I think people have probably let go of their hopes and dreams when it comes to Bailey Zappi. But can you see that happening? Rob, is that going to happen? Are we going to get Brady chance in the middle of like a poor Patriots offensive performance?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yes. Yeah. If the Patriots, I think the Patriots will be in this game, at least through halftime. So like, I think the only way that happens is if it's a disaster right off the bat. I think fans usually have patience week one, at least, especially in a matchup like this. If it was Patriots Cardinals and, it's 7-6 Arizona at halftime, they might be calling for them. But if it's 7-6, Eagles, I don't think they're worried about it. But I think I would not be surprised if they chant for Brady if things go south. I'm also curious, like, what's this Brady ceremony going to be, and how do they avoid it being like any Red Sox ceremony?
That's a model you typically want to avoid in general. I think it's going to be like they've done a million of these, although it's Brady, so maybe it's different. But they always have these halftime. Roll the stage out quickly. Someone, whether it's player or Kraft or someone else, gets up and says something briefly. And then by the time the specialists are out warming up, it's off and it's gone. But there's going to be a buzz in the stadium throughout, I would think, because again, he's going to be on the, this is ownership wants this. They want the fans to see him. They want them to be excited that he's there. So that's the concern, is against a really good team and a really good defense, is your offense is trying to get its feet underneath it. And you got the greatest quarterback of all time overlooking the proceedings that could lead to some interesting reactions from the fan base. Like Bill Belichick, I would assume, would have much rather this game come against whoever. You can't even mention a divisional opponent anymore because they're all pretty good. But how about like
they play
Indianapolis?
The Commanders, mid-season home against the Commanders. Like that would have been probably the best day to do it. But here we are. It is what it is. You guys are fantastic. Thanks so much for doing this. We're going to see you very soon. Buckets, we've got quick slants a little bit later. And Giles, I'll see you soon, and I'll be asking you how to spend my money.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Love it. A lot of fun with those guys, Giles and Snyder. Now let's get to our second conversation of the week this week. Week 1, college football, out of your mind, bananas stuff. And it wasn't just Deion Sanders. It was what happened between LSU and FSU, with the Noles just running wild on the Tigers. Then you're talking about, how about Duke and Clemson? Duke with the massive upset over Dabo Swinney. That they looked all kinds of out of sorts. down there at Duke the other night. Dane's going to tell us if there's anybody who cracked his top 50 just based on their week 1 performance, or maybe skyrocketed up the ranks of his top 50 in terms of draft eligible players. We know that's where Dane's focus is. That's why we love to talk to him. And of course, we're going to be hitting on receivers as well as tackles that look like Patriots fit. So again, as you're watching college football throughout the season this season, big time college programs, blue chip programs, and you flip that on a Saturday, you say, oh, I remember Perry and Brugler talked about that guy at left tackle. Let's zero in on him and let's see what kind of game he has. And then maybe you develop a little bit of an affinity for a player or two thinking about the spring ahead. Let's get to Dane. Here he is. All right, there he is, the great Dane Brugler of The Athletic. Dane, thanks so much for being on with us again here on Next Pats, man.
No, anytime, Phil.
What a weekend of college football. I think I first need to ask you, with all the excitement, especially with Dion and what he's got going on at Colorado, sort of headlining things, do you have an MVP of the weekend? This is technically week 1. I know we have week 0, which is a strange thing we do in college football. We've all just come to accept that, and it's just very, very odd to me. But do you have an MVP of what was a wild week 1 in college football?
It's hard not to say Shadir Sanders, Dion's son, the quarterback who, let's separate all the sound bites, the Dion connection, and just focus on what he did on tape in the opener. He made several plays that illustrate why everyone should be taking this guy seriously as a prospect. And it's not like he came out of nowhere. Okay. He was highly recruited. He was 23-3 as a starter the last 2 years at Jackson State. But now at the FBS level, it's like, okay, can you do it against the big boys? Can you do it against a team that has a suspect defense in TCU, but they were just in a national title game. They have some pros on that side of the ball. We saw a really nice arm, both in terms of velocity, in terms of placement. We saw different types of throws. He was accurate when he was asked to drive it. He was accurate when dropping it in the bucket on some of those deep shots. And he's a really athletic player. And it's not a crutch. It's more of an ace in the hole. It's something in his back pocket that he can use compared to something that's a central part of his game. So he has the traits of an early round NFL quarterback prospect. Now it's just about having that body of work, throwing for 510 yards against TCU. You've got Nebraska coming up later in the month of September. You have Oregon and USC back-to-back weeks. So I think the thing that impressed me the most about Shadir was just, you think about all the hype. In that game, they're just exchanging haymakers back and forth. There were like 5 lead changes in the fourth quarter. It'd be easy to get, let your emotions get the best of you, or even get a little tight after a mistake. But he was poised all 4 quarters. I mean, his heartbeat was not elevated. He was controlled. He was locked in. And I was really, really impressed by him. So it's going to be fun to track his progress now the rest of the season.
And Travis Hunter, too. I mean, well over 100 snaps. 11 catches. They win this game 45-42, and no one thought they would. I actually had a really interesting conversation yesterday with Jabril Peppers, who played both ways in college, but not like this.
No, I mean, it's
not full time, back and forth out there the entire game. I mean,
special teams too. I mean, according to PFF, he played 152 snaps against TCU, 65 offense, 80 on defense, 7 on special teams. I mean, it's rare. And I was trying to think of a way to contextualize what 152 snaps means. 2 years ago, Penn State and Illinois played a 9 overtime game, the first in history, college football history, to go that long. It's really why they changed the overtime rules in college, because of that game. The highest snap count in that 9 overtime game was 106. So like 50 fewer than what Hunter did in a 4-quarter game against TCU. And he's playing corner, he's playing receiver. So, I mean, you have to be the most well-conditioned athlete in the country to be doing that. We can't see it all year. It's just, I don't think it's possible. So how they manage Travis Hunter will be really interesting. And, he's only a true sophomore, so not draft eligible yet, but I don't know how you can keep your eyes off of him whenever you're watching that Colorado team.
Oh, and especially if you're a Patriots fan and you know what Bill Belichick likes, the more you can do, they live by that phrase here. He has got to be on their radars. But that wasn't the only great game. I mean, Florida State just whoops up on LSU, Duke with the big upset over Clemson. So wild weekend. I did want to ask you, Dane, you have your top 50 on The Athletic. You do such a great job tracking all these draft eligible guys for us. Is there anybody who maybe, based on, in large part, because of their week 1 performance, may have crept their way into that top 50, or maybe is skyrocketing up. They were already on the list, but they were lower down. And now you see them in a real live game situation against a real opponent for the first time. And it's like, wow, this guy really, blew you away. Are there any names like that we should be paying attention to?
Well, I mean, I think Sanders, he's putting himself in that mix. I think that this is going to be a really good quarterback class. And of course, at the top, you've got Caleb Williams, Drake May. The race is for who's that quarterback 3. And we've got a lot of different contenders. JJ McCarthy from Michigan right now is my quarterback 3. Riley Leonard from Duke. You mentioned his game against Clemson. He was, I think, 28, 29 in my top 50s. So he was already up there. He only helped himself. So that race for quarterback 3 is going to be really interesting. Shedeur Sanders, he could put himself in that mix if he continues to play to this level. But also you look at some of the receivers. I think Sunday was a little bit of vindication for me, talking about Keon Coleman, the Florida State receiver. I've been hyping him up all summer. Going back to last year, I was scouting Jaden Reed at Michigan State, but it was Coleman who kept jumping off the screen. 6'4", 215 pounds, played a little basketball for Izzo at Michigan State, transfers to Florida State this offseason, a much better offense. And that's what we saw Sunday night against LSU when Coleman was in single coverage. He's open, plain and simple. 9 catches, 122 yards, 3 touchdowns. And I really liked how he showed the different ways that he can win. His first touchdown, simple slant, but he beat the defender to the ball, and then he made the safety miss, long touchdown, a lot of yak. The other 2 touchdowns were just go and get up balls in the corner of the end zone. So the NFL, you think about what they love at the receiver position, guys that can get open, that can create after the catch, and then just explosive ball winners. That's Coleman. So he made my preseason top 50. He started the year at number 30, but I mean, he only helped himself with that Florida State debut. He's going to be creeping up and up more and more as we go through the season.
Yeah, 6'4", 215. He's just that classic X,
Yeah.
Even when he's covered, he's still open. Bill Belichick talks about these guys week after week after week. I think they think Devontae Parker is like that, but boy, if you're a Patriots fan, you're pining for whatever the next version of that is here in New England. Speaking of the Patriots, Dane, okay, that's our focus here.
Right.
Before I let you go, I do want to ask you, because there are 2 positions that I think a lot of Patriots fans are already focused on and will be focused on as the season wears on here, because they already look like they could be red flag kinds of position groups for the Patriots. One is tackle.
Yeah.
The other is receiver. They don't have a ton in the way of talent really at either spot that's under contract for next year. So first round, it feels like these positions could certainly be in the mix. Now they're too good probably to be at the very, very top. We're not going to be talking about, Marvin Harrison Jr. here in all likelihood, but are there sort of I know it's so early to even be talking about this, but we're talking maybe mid first round guys at either tackle or receiver that and listen, what the Patriots like by now, studying the draft as long as you have, and Bill Belichick running the show here as long as he has. Any Patriots types really stand out to you at those 2 spots, Dane?
Well, and surprisingly, when I narrowed down my top 50 a few weeks ago, I had more offensive tackles, 8 of them, than any other position. So more, I think pass rushers was 7, just behind. Cornerbacks was 7, but more offensive tackles than any other position. I think I'm very high on Amarius Mims from Georgia. I mean, it was like love at first sight when I saw this guy. A traits-based player, only 2 starts to his name. But you throw on that Ohio State tape from last year, and I mean, I'm sold. High level traits. I texted a Southeast scout about him over the summer, and he hadn't gone to Georgia yet, so he hadn't watched him. A week later, he gets back to me and says, "Yeah, you're right. This guy's going high." I'm just very eager to track his development this season. Joe Alt from Notre Dame, big athlete. Love his pedigree. I mean, you think about his dad, Pro Bowl blocker for Joe Montana in the early 90s in Kansas City. Alt needs to improve on a few things, but he's in that top 20 mix. He has size, he has athleticism. I think that he'll continue to get better with his technique, some of the punch timing. Houston's Patrick Paul. He's my top senior tackle to start the year. 6'7", 310, 36.5-inch arms. I graded him as a second-round player, but tackles with his tools usually sneak into the top 25. And then even mentioned guys like Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma, Kingsley Suamata-Tiaha from BYU. Both are really talented players that could ultimately compete for first-round snaps. And then, at receiver after Marvin Harrison, because it's early, but I I'd be very surprised if the first 3 players drafted are not Caleb Williams, Drake May, Marvin Harrison, in whatever order. I mean, it's September. I know. I'll be shocked if those are not the first 3 players drafted. But at receiver, you have his teammate at Ohio State, Emeka Egbuka, who I think in some ways is very similar to his former teammate Jackson Smith-Njigba at Ohio State, who was the first receiver drafted. Egbuka, just a little more explosive than he is. Malik Neighbors from LSU, a ton of talent. Wide receiver for the wide receiver duo for Washington. Both those guys that are going to pick up big numbers this year in that Huskies offense. So, and we mentioned Keon Coleman. So wide receivers, tackles, a lot of talent at those 2 positions. Plenty of guys that I think the Patriots have their eye on.
That's music to Patriots fans' ears. Dane, they don't want to wait until 2024 to see some of these guys brought into the Patriots offense, but it's hope. It's hope for the future. And man, I'm just looking, I have your top 50 list pulled up here, and I'm looking at some of those tackles that you mentioned. And boy, whether it's Mims from Georgia, Alt from Notre Dame, 6'7", 6'7", 6'7", behemoth human beings, the likes of which the Patriots usually, Isaiah Wynn aside, they usually like them big at that position. So it would make a lot of sense there. Dane, thanks so much for chatting with us here. We'll have to check with you at some point along the line during the college football season. Maybe Shedeur Sanders has worked his way like into your top 5 or something at some point, depending on how things are projecting there. But thanks for spending some time with us after a wild week 1 of college football.
Anytime, Phil. Thanks.
Love having Dane Brugler on the podcast whenever we can get him. So we will have to check in again, maybe mid-season, maybe right before bowl season, and see how some of these players are tracking, or if anybody else has popped up on his radar as a potential Patriots fit. Of course, you got to be following on Twitter at DP Brugler. Just tremendous stuff from him on a regular basis there on the X machine. Okay. Thanks so much for listening, guys. This was a marathon podcast, but thought we had a lot of good stuff in there. Love bringing on Giles. Love bringing on Buckets. Had a great time. Hopefully you did as well. Please, if you haven't already, rate, comment, subscribe. Let's keep this thing rolling through the regular season and pick up steam as we go through the regular season. We want to grow this podcast as much as humanly possible so we can give you the best product humanly possible. We'll be right back at it in week 2. We're talking about what we saw in week 1, where the Patriots need to go next when it comes to their week 2 matchup against the Dolphins. Enjoy week 1. It's going to be a fun one. We'll talk to you next week.